19 years ago, on a tranquil morning, shocking news emerged from a classroom at a university in Guangzhou. A young female doctoral student was discovered deceased and unclothed on the lecture platform. Scattered around her body were condoms and torn clothing. The disordered scene led to various speculations. Rumors of a crime of passion quickly spread. Moreover, the building where the victim was found had only one exit, monitored by security guards who restricted access to outsiders. No one reported seeing any suspicious individuals entering or leaving during the time of the incident. This scenario resembled a locked room mystery, adding to the enigma. However, as the police delved deeper, the case began to deviate from conventional assumptions. The victim's background, the timeline of the crime, and the motives of potential suspects, seemingly unrelated clues, converged to reveal an astonishing truth. Behind this perplexing case, who was the real perpetrator? How did the police unravel the complexities and ultimately apprehend the culprit? The incident occurred in Guangzhou, Guangdong Province, China. Around 9 p.m. on April 6, 2006, at the Guangzhou University of Chinese Medicine in Baiyun District, as night fell, the campus grew quiet with fewer students around. At that time, two students passing by the office building noticed something unusual. They looked up and saw black smoke emanating from a lit room on the fourth floor, suggesting a possible fire. The students promptly entered the office building to alert the security personnel. Several security guards proceeded to the fourth floor and identified the source of the smoke as the Jinkui research room. This room was used for the Jinkui Yaolue course, a crucial subject bridging basic and clinical studies in Chinese medicine, attended by both undergraduate and doctoral students. Given the late hour, the steel door was securely locked. After knocking loudly without any response, they assumed no one was inside, alleviating concerns about casualties. Nevertheless, to prevent property damage and fire escalation, they decided to extinguish the fire immediately. Using tools to forcibly unlock the door, they eventually gained entry to the research room. The scene that greeted them was shocking. A naked woman lay face down on the conference table, her body partially engulfed in flames. Books and papers on the table were also burning, though the fire remained localized. Two guards used fire extinguishers to successfully douse the flames, while another contacted the Baiyun District Public Security Bureau. By then, a crowd of teachers and students had gathered outside the research room. The presence of the unclothed woman sparked widespread speculation. A faculty member at the scene organized the orderly dispersal of students, instructing them not to spread information indiscriminately and to await the school's official statement. On the afternoon of the incident, Zhao was still seeing patients as usual at the Rheumatology Department, Internal Medicine Ward 6 of the university-affiliated hospital. Even the patients she regularly treated expressed sorrow over her tragic death. They described Dr. Zhao as young, beautiful, and deeply caring toward her patients. One 60-year-old man couldn't hold back his tears. He shared that he had suffered from rheumatism for over a decade, and in the 3 years he had been under Dr. Zhao's care, his chronic pain had significantly eased. During each appointment, she would not only examine him, but also take time to chat and show concern for the daily lives of elderly patients. From a social standpoint, police found no evidence that Zhao Shuzhe had personal grudges or enemies, effectively ruling out revenge as a motive for the murder. News of her death spread rapidly across campus. Many students were too frightened to approach the Jinkui research room, which had been sealed off. People began avoiding walking alone in the academic buildings at night. Naturally, the case not only caused fear among faculty and students, but also sparked intense speculation. A disturbing and undeniable element of the crime was that the victim was found naked and a used condom was discovered at the scene. This led many to believe the case involved a crime of passion. Rumors began to swirl that Shuzhe was popular among male students, and soon gossip spread that she had been dating 3 men at once. But was Zhao Shuzhe really the kind of woman the rumors made her out to be, promiscuous and reckless in love? According to several testimonies, the victim had one steady boyfriend, who was also a doctoral student in the same school. On the morning after the incident, He was summoned to the building where the crime had occurred to cooperate with the police investigation. He told the authorities that their relationship had been stable for some time. They had already met each other's families and were making plans to get married. Throughout the interrogation, he remained emotionally restrained. However, once it ended and he stepped outside the building, he suddenly collapsed beside two male friends who had been waiting for him. Witnesses then heard the sound of him crying uncontrollably. The two friends were also briefly questioned by police. They were his dorm roommates and close companions. From them, officers learned that the relationship between Shijie and her boyfriend had been serious and sincere. The couple had planned to marry right after graduation. Her sudden death devastated him. The two friends also said they had never heard of Shijie being involved in any complicated romantic entanglements. However, some other students did confirm that they knew of at least two young men who had previously pursued her. This led to a new theory. Could it be that the killer, upon learning that Zhao Shijie was planning to get married, became consumed by jealousy and rage? After assaulting her, did he then strike her to death with a hammer out of hatred fueled by unrequited love? According to colleagues at the hospital, after finishing her daytime shift, the victim had dinner before leaving the inpatient department and heading to the Jinkui research room to continue her academic work. Surveillance footage from the first floor of the office building showed her entering the building a little after 8 p.m. She was on the phone and holding her wallet at the time. This raised the question, had she arranged to meet someone that night? Was the person someone she knew, or an outsider? At that point in the investigation, police had few leads to work with, and the case was full of baffling details. For example, why did the perpetrator take Shijie's phone, wallet, and even her clothes? It seemed like a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence. But then why leave behind a used condom containing DNA and the hammer believed to be the murder weapon? Was it due to panic and stress? Or were these planted intentionally to mislead investigators? Aside from the motive, another major point of suspicion was the cause of death. When the first security guards arrived and forced the door open, they found the fire inside wasn't severe, just small flames on her back and arm, likely spreading from burning books on the desk. While the room was filled with smoke, it wasn't thick enough to cause suffocation. Police concluded that if the victim had been alive when the fire started, she likely would have been able to put it out. The room had access to water, and there were no signs that she had struggled or made any effort to escape. This suggested that she had already died before the fire began. The forensic team also found clear traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. Technical analysis confirmed the bleeding wasn't caused by the fire. Two likely explanations remained. It was either due to internal bleeding from a strong impact to the head or from poisoning. Police also briefly considered suicide, given the Jinkui lab was a sealed environment. The outer metal door was locked and all the windows were closed. After 10 p.m., the building went into lockdown mode, and no one was allowed to enter. The main entrance had a security guard, and staff routinely patrolled the building. If the perpetrator had entered or exited through the main entrance, they would have risked being identified. However, the suicide theory couldn't explain why the victim was found naked and why her clothes were missing. That's why many media outlets referred to this case as a locked room murder. Still, the media didn't stop at surface details. Several news outlets launched independent investigations into the building after the incident. One group of reporters discovered that the building actually had more than one point of entry. They took a stairwell located far from the Jinkui research room and reached the top floor. Through an unlocked door, they accessed the rooftop. On the day they were conducting their covert investigation, they happened to find two adult men sleeping up there. The men appeared disheveled, their clothes torn and faces dirty. When they noticed the reporters filming with handheld cameras, they quickly got up and tried to flee. The journalists managed to stop them momentarily and asked a few quick questions. It turned out the two men were homeless individuals who usually begged for food nearby. With nowhere to sleep at night, they often sneaked into unsupervised corners of the university, cafeterias, stadiums, and even academic buildings to find shelter. Whenever a security guard showed up to chase them away, they would politely move to another spot, playing a sort of cat-and-mouse game. When the reporters mentioned the incident, the homeless men appeared genuinely surprised and claimed they knew nothing about the fire in the building. They didn't seem to be lying. However, this interaction highlighted a critical point. The security at the building wasn't as tight as people assumed. If a suspect was familiar enough with the layout, they could have easily slipped away unnoticed after committing the crime. Because this was a high-profile case that took place within a university, it drew immediate attention from senior officials at the Guangzhou Public Security Bureau. The Baiyun District Police Department quickly formed a task force named Team 4.6 to handle the case, deploying elite officers from the Criminal Investigation Division, the Interrogation Unit, and other specialized departments to launch a comprehensive investigation. So how did this special task force make a breakthrough? And how was the perpetrator finally caught? Under the leadership of Director Li Ming, who headed the task force, the investigation was divided into 3 key focus areas: the crime scene, the victim's social network, and the stolen items. Over the course of nearly a week, task force members worked around the clock. They interviewed more than 100 people and gradually ruled out over 20 key individuals. This included Xu Zhe's boyfriend, classmates, co-workers, and family members. All of them were cleared of suspicion, pushing the investigation into a deadlock. This put intense physical and mental pressure on the investigators. Many officers were working day and night, leading to extreme exhaustion. Then, in the early morning of the 6th day, during a routine progress meeting, the team responsible for tracking down the victim's missing belongings delivered a crucial breakthrough. They had accessed transaction records from several bank accounts in Zhao Shuji's name. Using data provided by the banks, they reviewed deposits, withdrawals, transfers, and spending activity, and soon uncovered a key lead. In the early hours following the murder, one of Zhao Shuji's Minsheng Bank savings cards had been used at an ATM belonging to the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, located near a busy intersection. Furthermore, the police tech team discovered that around the same time, Zhao Shuji's cell phone had briefly been turned on and a call had been made to ICBC customer service. Armed with these 2 critical pieces of information, investigators rushed to the ICBC branch and retrieved surveillance footage. From the video, they were able to identify a male suspect. After conducting additional background checks and follow-up investigations, the task force finally confirmed the man's identity. His name was Xiang Jin, a 25-year-old local from Guangzhou. The special task force didn't let up in their efforts to track him down and eventually discovered his hideout. From there, they launched a coordinated arrest operation. At around 3:30 p.m. on April 12th, police apprehended Xiang Jin at apartment 803, entrance C, in the Chunhui Xianting residential complex on Tong Tai Road, Baiyun District. The many mysteries that had plagued the task force were finally close to being unraveled. But to their surprise, the seemingly mild-mannered young man began playing psychological games with the investigators as soon as he was taken in. Xiang Jin fully understood the gravity of the crime. He knew that if he confessed, he'd be facing a very serious charge. However, he had been closely following the news coverage of the case and noticed there had been no reports of eyewitnesses or solid forensic evidence tied directly to the crime scene. So, clinging to a sliver of hope, Xiang stayed silent during the first interrogation that evening. When he did speak, he claimed that he had simply found the victim's phone and bank card on the street. But the seasoned investigators weren't easily fooled. They had their own strategies. After several intense rounds of questioning, they touched on topics relating to family and loved ones. This struck a nerve with Xiang, breaking through his psychological defenses. Realizing there was no way out, he finally chose to confess. It was then that police heard, piece by piece, Xiang Jin's chilling confession to robbery, rape, and murder. He turned out to be a cunning individual with no job and no steady income. He occasionally asked his family for money, but support was limited. To get by, he sometimes resorted to petty theft. The university town area where the Guangzhou University of Chinese Medicine was located had become one of Xiang's main areas of activity. Since many campuses were open and lacked strict control over non-student entry, Xiang often visited basketball and soccer courts to play sports and blend in with students. Naturally, the question that puzzled the police most was, how did a drifter like Xiang Jin end up targeting someone like Xu Jie, a doctoral student? And why did he choose to kill her? According to his confession, around 7 p.m. on April 6th, after playing soccer with some college students, Xiang sat down on a grassy patch to rest. From his backpack, he pulled out a bottle of baijiu, a strong Chinese liquor, and began drinking. The more he drank, the more irritated he became. Just the day before, he had lost his phone, and the little money he had left would barely cover his food expenses for the month, certainly not enough to buy a new phone. That's when the idea of theft first crept into his mind. Taking advantage of the darkness, he began wandering the campus, looking for an opportunity. Before long, he spotted a young woman walking alone, heading toward one of the academic buildings while talking on her phone. That woman was Zhao Xujie. She became his target purely by chance. Xiang Jin followed her into the academic office building where the crime occurred. They both went up to the 4th floor and stopped in front of the Jin Kui research room. He watched as Zhao Xujie used her key to unlock the lab door, but she didn't fully close it behind her. That gave him an idea. A moment later, Xiang gently knocked and let himself in. When Xujie saw a man unexpectedly enter the room, she was caught off guard. Before she could ask who he was, Xiang Jin immediately stated his purpose. He claimed he was looking for a teacher's phone number. By coincidence, Xiang Jin happened to mention a teacher with the last name Li, someone Xujie actually knew. Being kind-hearted, she turned around to retrieve her phone so she could help him look up the number. At that moment, Xiang Jin suddenly pulled out a bottle of baijiu, a strong Chinese liquor, and smashed it over her head, causing her to lose consciousness and collapse to the floor. Xiang then rummaged through her purse, stealing her phone, MP3 player, wallet, and other belongings. Inside the wallet, he found a few bank cards, some cash, and a pendant. Initially, Xiang Jin intended to simply take the bag and leave. But at that moment, he noticed a condom in the bag. That discovery seemed to trigger his dark instincts. His gaze shifted back to Xujie, still unconscious on the floor, and he formed a vile intention. He used a shoelace to tie her wrists together, and then carried out a horrific sexual assault. Afterward, Xujie began to stir slightly. Her eyes barely opened, as if she were regaining consciousness. Fearing that she might remember his face, Xiang panicked and began looking around the room. By coincidence, he spotted a small mallet on the table. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and struck her in the head with force, causing her to lose consciousness again. At this point, Xiang was nervous and uncertain whether she was dead or alive, but he knew he needed to get out of there quickly. He lifted Xujie onto the table and stuffed all her clothing into his backpack. Before leaving, he noticed a package of unused copy paper on the table. He tore it open, spread the sheets around Xujie, and then used a lighter from his pocket to set the papers on fire. According to Xiang's statement, he deliberately lit one of the pages and placed it on her back, hoping the fire would destroy the body and erase any evidence. But this part of his confession seemed highly dubious. Since the police didn't release many details about their findings, it's unclear exactly how Xiang managed to flee the scene. However, there are two main theories. One, he might have hidden somewhere in the building and waited until the chaos of the fire response gave him a chance to slip away unnoticed. Or two, even though Xiang wasn't a student, he often played sports on campus, so he was likely familiar with the building's layout. From the 4th floor research room, he could have taken the stairs to the 3rd floor, exited through a bathroom window, and made his way to the soccer field. He might have used that route to escape after setting the fire. Because of the lack of detailed information, the case became a hot topic online. According to Xiang's testimony, his original motive was simply theft. The rape, murder, and arson, he claimed, were all impulsive decisions sparked by chance. But this logic didn't sit well with many internet users. After all, if this was a meticulously planned crime, wouldn't it have been recklessly sloppy of him to leave behind the mallet and the used condom at the scene? Moreover, the fact that Xiang Jin attempted to withdraw money using Zhao Xujie's bank card and turned on her phone just hours after committing the crime suggests that he clearly lacked careful planning or any real sense of how to evade investigation. Ultimately, people could only conclude that this was likely a crime committed impulsively under the influence of alcohol, with no specific target in mind. On November 20th, 2006, the Guangzhou Intermediate People's Court held a closed trial for the case. Xiong Jin confessed to the charges of robbery and rape. That day, aside from his court-appointed defense attorney, no family members or friends of Xiong Jin were present at the trial. He admitted that for the more than 7 months he had been in custody, he had no idea how to endure each day. He expressed deep regret for his actions, saying he didn't know how to make amends for the harm he had caused both families. In response to the victim's parents' demand for more than 1,060,000 RMB in compensation, Xiong Jin said he was willing to pay, but regrettably he had no personal assets with which to do so. Reporters interviewed the victim's family outside the courthouse. Her mother, unable to cope with the grief of losing her daughter, suffered a mental breakdown and had to remain in their hometown in Shanxi, unable even to attend the trial. The victim's grandmother, who had watched her grow up, was also kept in the dark. Due to her advanced age, the family lied to her, saying her granddaughter had gone abroad to study. But the elderly woman, though aged, wasn't naive. She questioned why her granddaughter never called home. The family didn't know how much longer they could continue hiding the truth from her. On December 15, 2006, the Guangzhou Intermediate People's Court announced its verdict. Xiong Jin was sentenced to death for the combined crimes of robbery and rape, and he was stripped of his political rights for life. Xiong Jin appealed, arguing that he had confessed after his arrest and that this should be considered a mitigating factor. But this was merely his final desperate attempt to escape judgment. On February 28, 2008, the appeals court rejected his appeal and upheld the original sentence. On October 10th, Xiong Jin was executed. Following the incident, the Guangzhou University of Chinese Medicine paid Zhao's parents 100,000 RMB in aid, 9,383 RMB for funeral expenses, 22,860 RMB from public donations, and 11,171 RMB for travel expenses. However, Zhao's parents believed the university had been negligent in its campus security and, in 2009, filed a lawsuit against the school, demanding an additional 320,000 RMB in compensation. The university argued that the incident occurred in an administrative building with no special access restrictions. Security staff were required to patrol the floors every 1 to 2 hours, and the murder was a sudden, unforeseeable event. Therefore, the perpetrator, Xiong Jin, should bear full responsibility for the damages. Regrettably, the court ultimately ruled that the university was not at fault in terms of safety management and rejected the lawsuit filed by Zhao's parents. The victim's father was deeply dissatisfied with the verdict. He once said that, regardless of the legal ruling, since the murder happened in a research room on campus, the school should feel ashamed of what had occurred. Here is the translated version in proper American English, with unit conversions where applicable and Chinese currency kept in RMB. The murder that occurred on this university campus nearly 20 years ago still draws a heavy sigh whenever it's mentioned. The strange circumstances surrounding the early stages of the case sparked countless theories from both police and the public. One of the most talked about elements was the presence of the condom at the crime scene. Some netizens even created an alternate theory, imagining a scenario involving a betrayed lover turned predator. In their version, Xiong Jin and the victim had once been romantically involved. They claim the two had arranged to meet that night before the victim's wedding, and she had brought a condom to prevent pregnancy after their encounter. The location, a secluded research lab, was chosen intentionally according to the theory because the victim was familiar with the campus and knew that the room wouldn't be in use at that hour. Perhaps, some said, this very room had once been their secret rendezvous spot. In the end, driven by jealousy and resentment, Xiong Jin supposedly killed his lover and staged the scene to look like a robbery. To be honest, some netizens truly have vivid imaginations. Regardless, it's hard to believe that a promising young doctor on the brink of a happy marriage would so easily lose her sense of judgment. It's a tragedy that this almost surreal crime came to pass through a chain of random events. Xiong Jin was frustrated after losing his phone. He lost control after drinking alcohol. By chance, he entered the lab. By chance, he encountered a woman alone. A disaster that could have been avoided began from there. If only he hadn't been drinking that day. If she hadn't been in that room. If a security guard had asked just one more question. If someone had been with her. Perhaps none of this would have happened. But life doesn't offer what-ifs. Fate can't be rewound. We never know which small choice will ultimately lead us to the edge of a cliff. That's why the warning from this case hits so hard. The most dangerous people are often those who seem completely ordinary. What's most terrifying isn't the monsters hiding in the dark, but the collapse of a person's humanity in a single moment of lost control. We hope the departed can rest in peace, and that those left behind find strength. Let us remember this painful past and hope for a world with more warmth and protection and fewer regrets and tragedies. And finally, if you enjoy true crime videos like this one, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.